everybody. Whew, it's been a while since I used this chainsaw. This is only the beginning. Oh, hey, I'm out here doing a fence line, trying to get this set up. Let's talk about horses, huh? Okay. I did a video of who or should not have horses. Well, another question that's frequently asked is, how much does it cost to have a horse anyway? Well, that's a really hard question to answer because costs vary from region to region, state to state, area to area. It really does. So you pretty much have to do the research for yourself. But some of the things that you need to take into consideration is whether or not you have grazing available. Do you have land for grazing, or do you have to board your horse? And here comes Gracie. And boarding costs range too, from self-care to full services. It's a wide range. You can get self-care. Personally, that's my favorite because it gives you hands-on for your horse. But sometimes that's not a possibility. Okay, so if you don't have land available for grazing, that means you're going to have to buy hay. How much does hay cost in your area? I get a really good deal from my neighbor. And from what I'm hearing from other places, I've got a sweet price in my area and from my neighbor. So knowing how much I pay for hay isn't going to help you one bit. You really do need to check out the cost of hay in your area. And that can range from farmer to farmer. So ask around, check around, and also the quality of the hay too. Because that's very important when it comes to horses. You got to have good hay. And sometimes with better quality hay, you're going to pay a dearer price for it. So that's something you really got to take into consideration is the price of hay. Now, beside the cost of hay, there's also your foot care. Horses have to have their feet maintained. No foot, no horse. That's all there is to it. Sometimes you can get away with barefoot trim, and some horses, generally speaking, you can go a while without having to trim their feet. But the general rule of thumb is every 6 weeks they need to be trimmed. Frequently in the winter, now I don't know if this holds true down south, but from where I used to live up north, they didn't have to have their feet trimmed, but for 8 weeks at a time up where it was colder. So it really depends. I had one horse one time that she had to have her feet done every 4 weeks. I had a farrier scoff at me, and I was just kind of like trying him out to see if I liked him. And he said, no horse needs to have their feet trimmed every 4 weeks. Needless to say, he didn't get the job. The farrier that did get the job, even though she was thinking that no horse needs to have their feet trimmed every 4 weeks, she didn't tell me that. She was willing to come out every 4 weeks to do this horse's hooves. And guess what? She learned I was right. I knew my horse's feet. Now that's a very unusual case that has to have their feet done so often. Most horses, generally 6 weeks, 8 weeks tops. But I have known the odd one where they're lucky if they need to have their feet trimmed twice a year. It's just the way their feet grew, or the way they wore them down. And they wore them down nicely, nice and even. So it is something it depends on the horse. It also depends on your area. The price of a farrier, that changes from region to region as well. I pay $15 less per horse here than I did up in New Jersey. So there's no point in me telling you how much to expect to pay for a farrier. That depends on your area. And You got to make sure you get a good one too. So ask around. Look at people's horses' feet. See what they look like. If you don't know what you're looking at, do some research until you understand what the angle of the hoof should look like. It's very important. So what about another thing that's often forgotten when it comes to the cost of a horse is having their teeth floated. Most people don't even know that the horse's teeth have to be floated on a fairly regular basis. Again, it depends on the horse. Generally speaking, the general rule of thumb is once a year they have their teeth done. Well, I knew a horse that had to have her teeth done twice a year. That's the exception to the rule. But I've also known a horse that he never had to have his teeth done. He had great teeth, you know, but that's the exception to the rule. That's not the rule. Sometimes you may be able to get away with every 2 years. It depends. You got to know your horse. Okay, but the general rule of thumb is once a year you have to have their teeth floated. Having their teeth floated is when they file down the points, the sharp points that form on the edges of their teeth. As they eat, if those points are not filed down, it will prevent them from being able to eat It will prevent them from being able to eat properly, and it could lead to starvation. So having their teeth floated is very important. Other costs would be veterinary care. Now again, that depends on your area. It also depends on the health of your horse. How accident prone is your horse? How much of the first aid doctoring are you able to do? If you can give your own shots, that's great. That'll save you some money. If not, if you're too squeamish, you're going to have pay a vet to have it done. What shots you have, that may depend on your area as to what's required and what isn't. If you're transporting a horse across state lines, without fail, it doesn't matter. You must have a Coggins. That is a blood test to see if they are exposed to a certain disease. And I'm sorry, I always forget the names of these diseases. I just, the vet says, okay, you have to have this. Okay, I have to have it. But it's got a really long name, and I can't remember what it is. But anyway, Coggins test is required. If you are just going to trail ride, but you're going to cross state lines, you must have a Coggins. And that will vary as to what you're doing, how often you have to have it done. And the rules have changed over the last several years, so I'm not sure I'm up to date on what they are, so I'm not even going to try to say what it is, because I don't want you to misquote me. But you have to find out in your area what the requirements are. So really, all these things have to be taken into consideration when you're looking to get into horse ownership. It can be expensive, depending on what you want to do, depending on how you want to care for your horse. The basic needs: forage, which would be pasture and or hay; shelter. In some places, just a grove of trees is considered shelter. Some people think they have to have a big fancy barn with big fancy stalls, where the horse is stalled almost 24/7, which frankly is not good for the horse. The fancier it is, the more it's going to cost you. I have a run-in for my horses. I know what I paid to have it built here, but it might be cheaper where you are. You might be able to build it yourself. That would save you some money. Hey, maybe you can build one out of pallet wood. Who knows? All these things, you've got to think carefully before you jump into horse ownership. Okay? Loving a horse, loving the animal, that's not enough. Because frankly, that won't feed it, that won't care for it. There's certain things, yes, we can learn to do ourselves, but there's other things where we really need qualified people to do for us. One thing for sure is doing the horse's feet. That should be done by someone who is qualified, and also veterinary care. Like I said, there's certain things that, yes, we can do as horse owners ourselves, but there's other things that, yeah, you may need a vet for. Oh, that's what I was hearing. Mirror you. Yep, she's got to show up. I hope this was helpful to you all. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below, and I will do the best to my ability to answer them. I said, I don't know it all. Nobody is an expert, and I know I certainly am not. I'm always learning. So this is Mother of Many Horses with Honey Hollow Homestead. Now I got to get back to work doing fence. Have a good one, people.